Aloha, inspired moneymakers. Welcome to Inspired Money, the show where we strive to do more with our money. If you want to make more, give more, and live more, you are in the right place. Today, we're discussing negotiation, a powerful skill crucial for wealth and success. Here's the thing. Many of us shy away from negotiating because it makes us feel uncomfortable. It's not something that we want to do. But Professor of Dispute Resolution and Organizations at the Kellogg School of Management, Lee Thompson says, great negotiators are made, not born. Learning negotiation transforms opportunities in salary talks, business deals, and everyday interactions. For me, I don't really like negotiating, especially when buying a car. But I'm slowly trying to build that muscle. Today, I sold a pair of snowboarding boots for $30. I got those snowboarding boots off of Facebook Marketplace last week for free. And little wins like that can make you feel really good. That's peanuts, though. Here's why negotiating matters. About 58% of Americans accepted the initial offer at their current job without negotiating. That's according to a Fidelity Investment study. But negotiating works. 85% of Americans who countered on salary, other compensation or benefits, or both pay and other compensation and benefits, they got at least some of what they asked for. So if you don't negotiate, you could be leaving a lot of money on the table. Negotiating is learned and a superpower that can unlock favorable outcomes and strengthen relationships. To inspire us to embrace negotiation on our journey to prosperity, let's bring in our panelists, which at this moment is a panel of one. Brian Will, welcome. Let me introduce you. Brian is a serial entrepreneur and best-selling author known for founding 7 successful companies with valuations exceeding $500 million. One of his books is No, The Psychology of Sales and Negotiations, 40 Lessons in Negotiation from a Street-Smart Negotiator. That caught my attention. Beyond his entrepreneurial achievements, Brian manages a thriving restaurant chain in Atlanta and a substantial real estate portfolio across Georgia and Florida. Brian, that sounds like you're a really, really busy guy.
Andy, thanks for having me, man. And I got to tell you, it sounds like I should be really busy, but the truth is I have really, really good people who work for me, and they manage almost all of the details. I'm an ADHD kind of guy, so I kind of sit at 30,000 feet in command and control and let my team do what they're good at.
And I did hear in your story that it hasn't always been success. Like in your youth as a student, things were not always so hunky-dory.
I jokingly call myself a 20-year overnight success, right? You look at me, people look at me and go, oh my God, you're so successful. You're so lucky. And I'm like, you weren't here for the first 20 years when I was losing my house and my car got repossessed and I couldn't afford my health insurance and my daughter needed open heart surgery and I was broke. You weren't here for that. All you see is today. You know, people live in their world today. So it was a lot of lessons learned. And in this case, a lot of sales and negotiation that got me where I am today.
Well, I look forward to learning from you. I know that we have other panelists who hopefully will be coming in later. I hope that they're just running late and not missing the entire episode. But this is what live streaming is all about. We roll with the punches. So thank you, Brian. Let's go to segment 1.
Understanding power dynamics is essential to mastering the art of negotiation, a crucial skill for financial success. Power influences negotiation strategies and outcomes, shaping the approach and confidence of negotiators. Power in negotiation affects behavioral approaches, with powerful negotiators often exhibiting assertive and reward-seeking behaviors. This mindset leads to more confident negotiation tactics, impacting the negotiation process. There are different types of power in negotiations. Role power derives from one's title or position, while psychological power comes from a self-perceived sense of control. Recognizing and utilizing these power types can significantly influence negotiation effectiveness. Power dynamics in negotiations are dynamic and interactive. In essence, navigating power dynamics in negotiation involves understanding the behaviors associated with different power types and adapting to the evolving nature of power relationships. Mastering these dynamics is key to effective negotiation strategies, leading to financial success and goal achievement.
I'm really curious how important assertiveness and confidence comes into play here. Brian, I know that you talk about the sales process. It starts with preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about like this power dynamic and how we can prepare for that?
You know, I call all sales negotiation, by the way. Sales and negotiation are hand in hand. And so if you're in sales, you are also a negotiator. And by the way, negotiation by its very nature means that it's a back and forth. It's not, this is what I'm offering and you're going to take it and that's all there is to it, right? So when we're talking negotiation, we're talking back and forth. And so the very nature of that means that there's going to be a bottom and a top, right? Or what we call a range of where that negotiation is going to start and end. You need to understand as the negotiator that you need to start more or less in the bottom of this range, whatever it is, because whoever's selling is at the top. And if you're at the top, you need to understand that whoever's coming in is coming in at the bottom of that range while you're at the top. And our job is to come together to figure out how to get that deal done through the negotiation process. And a lot of the power dynamics that you were talking about, or that the little video was talking about there, are so critical. And it's the my book's called The Psychology of Sales and Negotiation, right? It's the psychology of what they're thinking, how they're reacting, what they're expecting, and then how you're going to deal with that, counter it, and then move through that process to get you where you need to go.
Some people have told me that we're all in sales because
everything.
Not everybody is a trained salesperson in their job, but those who have gone through sales training, their eyes are open and they're like, wait a minute, everything's sales. Talking to my spouse requires sales skills.
If you're married, you sold. If you're like me, you sold way up. Like you're like, oh my God, you're awesome. You can't believe the deal you're getting.
Do you see the world as just constant negotiation also?
If you think about every business in the world sells a product, right? Or they're not in business, which means, I want you to understand what I said, every company in the world sells a product. It doesn't matter how good you are or how good your product is, somebody still has to sell it. And that sale is what drives business and what makes the world go round. Everything is about sales. Whether you're negotiating on a deal, whether you're selling a product, whether you're trying to find a wife, whether you're trying to negotiate your job or your salary, everything is a sale. And I tell people all the time, you need to learn how to negotiate, because if you don't, and you come up against a good negotiator, they're going to eat your lunch.
It's very important because one of the most successful business owners that I knew, I think he's passed away, but the advice that he gave me was that in his experience, it's much better to have the company with the B product with an A sales team versus the reverse, having an A product with the B sales team. And I'm just wondering, yeah, go ahead.
My insurance company we sold in 2008, we were not selling the cheapest insurance product in the market. In fact, we were probably one of the highest priced products in the market. But we trained our salespeople how to overcome objections and sell that product anyway. And we did, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales for that company. So it's not really always about the price. It's really about the process and the salesperson that moves that.
So you were referencing this difference in the power dynamic and how do you get to the same level? You just also mentioned overcoming objections. How do you, as a salesperson, prepare for potential objections or to train your salespeople to get good at addressing objections?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Andy, this is the heart and soul of the training process that we go through. And what I tell organizations is that your sales organization, your sales team, your sales members are getting the exact same objections every single time, right? There's probably a set of 5 to 6 to 7 objections that they get every single time with every single product or client. It doesn't matter if you're selling software or insurance product or roofing sales or whatever. The objections are the same. Your job as management, as the sales management, is to figure out what those objections are and then build a process and a scripting around those objections so that we can overcome them before the client has them, right? If I already know what your objection is, my job is to overcome that objection before you tell it to me. Because if I can overcome it before you tell it to me, then you're not going to have it, right? And the first objection we always teach is the objection that you're in sales. That is the first objection in every sales environment. People naturally don't trust salespeople because they don't think that they're looking out for their best interest. If I know that, then my job is to overcome that first objection before they have it so that I can lower those defensive walls so that I can actually get in and sell you something while overcoming the objections to you buying it along the way. I mean, this is a heart and soul of what we do. Overcome objections before they have them by understanding what those objections are and building a process around it.
So with your insurance company, you have to know your product well, you have to know your clients well.
And your competition.
Was it a small list of objections that were most common that you could prepare your sales people?
Almost always. A price is an objection. We call it the why and the when, right? Why are you looking to buy? Who have you shopped with before? What prices have you seen? What prices are you paying now? Why didn't you buy from the competition? And then when are you looking to buy? What's important about that time frame? If I know the why and the when, I can build a fact-finding questionnaire around those answers to get you to actually sell yourself at the end of the day.
I want to welcome in my good friend, Everold Reid. Let me give a quick introduction. Since his serendipitous entry into car sales, I think in 1989.
89, yeah.
Everold's innate selling prowess has propelled him to top-ranking positions and garnered numerous awards throughout his 3-decade career. A devoted student of continuous improvement, he's developed a proven blueprint called the Reid Method for automated sales and marketing, sought after by global automotive brands, offering invaluable insights to elevate performance and success in a very competitive industry. Everald, we're talking about the power dynamic when negotiating. And I wanted to ask you, in auto sales, what has been your experience in who has the power, who doesn't have the power, and how do you get to a position where your customer is comfortable and starts opening up with you?
Well, thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure. And I was listening to some of what Brian was saying, and it's so true. And a lot of the power dynamic, in my opinion, has shifted a bit more from, let's say, especially in the automotive space where we are here in Canada, where a few years ago, a client would come into the showroom and it would automatically be assumed that the power lies with the client. But in recent times, especially with more complex ways of acquiring vehicles, being finance, leasing, we do a lot of leases, and we do a lot of different structures within leases, and the technological advancements in our automobiles. We find that clients, what I teach to my trainees, be it dealerships managers and sales reps, is that the clients actually need you. So if you go into this right off the bat thinking that you're beholden to the client, you're already starting from behind. So if you want to set yourself up to have a better position to negotiate, you have to go into this with a lot more confidence, where you know from the very get-go, the client needs you as much as you need them to purchase a vehicle or a product or a service. So I go in and I teach, okay, they need you just as much. And you'll find, to be honest with you, in the last couple of years, and I've recently done the analysis on this, out of close to a couple hundred vehicles I delivered in 2023, while keeping the business schedule, as you know I do, we rarely negotiated. I could literally tell you without a shadow of a doubt that I did not negotiate more than 10 out of the close to 200 deals, simply because there is already a trust factor. So what I try to do is I establish from the very beginning that I'm here to solve problems and I'm here to offer you solutions. I'm here to listen to you and I'm here to guide you alongside with you, as opposed to haggle with you or fight with you. We're on the same mission. If I listen to you and I understand and I establish common ground as to what this relationship is meant to accomplish, there's very little negotiating required. And I find lately that when I look back at last year, I literally had less than 10 actual offers, because most of the clients, once we communicated and I put proposals in front of them, as long as I explained what I was crafting, they did not object. They would ask questions, and I would explain how it benefits them and how it improves their lives, and it makes their circumstances a lot better, and it also sets them up for the next transaction. So clients appreciate that, and I find that takes a lot of the need away to negotiate.
That sounds unheard of to me, that of like such a small percentage actually were negotiating with you. And that seems like because the way you positioned yourself as an advisor serving the customer, you're sitting on the same side of the table as them.
Absolutely. And they actually pick up on that real quick. When they sit in my office and they see, you'll see the clients observing. They're observing me and they're observing my office. And one or two out of five will look at the awards, and first thing they'll say is, that's a lot of awards, right? So it brings down their guard right away. And then once we start communicating, and they realize we're not communicating about the same things that they heard at another dealership, the same type of car talk or negotiating talk or offer or price or payment talk. We're talking a different language. We're talking about solutions. We're talking about identifying problems. We're talking about improving circumstances. And we're talking about setting them up so that the next 2, 3, 4 years makes it easier for them to transition into another vehicle or another product when the time comes. Because we know that our clients are making buying decisions much sooner. So we're not selling them or leasing them a vehicle for them to keep for 5, 10 years anymore. They're transitioning a lot sooner. So one of my biggest things in my success is that we're negotiating is literally taken out of the equation. Is by selling today, I also set up the next potential sale because of how I structured today's sale.
That is great. Our third panelist is in the house. Let's move to the next segment, and then I'll introduce him.
In real estate, mastering negotiation is crucial. For buyers, it's about showing financial readiness and making savvy offers. Pre-approval for mortgages demonstrates seriousness, giving buyers an edge in competitive scenarios. The key is to balance realistic offers with the market's pulse, particularly in high-stakes bidding wars. Sellers focus on maximizing value. Strategic pricing attracts serious interest, while staging elevates the property's appeal. Skillfully navigating multiple offers and counteroffers can significantly impact the final deal. Negotiation is more than just numbers. It's about striking a balance where compromise and adaptability lead to beneficial outcomes for both parties. This involves emotional intelligence, understanding market dynamics, and a bit of psychological insight. Real estate agents are instrumental in these negotiations. Their experience and knowledge of legal and ethical standards can transform an average deal into an exceptional one. Whether buying or selling, informed and tactical moves pave the way for successful transactions.
So I'm excited to welcome Rich Carey back to Inspired Money. Rich successfully built a real estate portfolio that he managed while stationed in Germany and Korea. He managed to acquire over 20 properties and be debt-free. Today, he's retired from the Air Force, and he's living off the passive income generated by his 30-plus properties in Montgomery, Alabama. He's a realtor. He manages his investments, and you can learn about building wealth through real estate on his TikTok and YouTube channels, Rich on Money. Welcome back, Rich.
Hey, how you doing? Sound okay? Am I good?
You sound good. You sound and look
right.
good.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, what are key lessons you've learned about negotiating from your real estate investments?
You know, it's interesting. I came from a police background. I actually came from a law enforcement background. And so I sort of had a career of doing, I guess you would say, interviews and interrogations, right? That's a little strange place to start, but interestingly enough, I remember getting in training in something called the Reid method a long time ago. That's actually training that's given to law enforcement. And I remember taking a course in that was several weeks long. So I think one of the most important things, I think it has a lot to do with, first of all, you really have to understand the market. There's always trends in the market as far as whether you've got, whether it's a buyer's market, whether it's a seller's market. And you need to understand those trends. And you need to understand it nationwide. You need to understand it at the state level, the city level, and even at the neighborhood level. And especially I think it has a lot to do with too. I mean, are you talking about an investment property for between $50,000 and $200,000? Or are you talking about in Montgomery, Alabama? If you're talking about a property that's, let's say, $400,000 to $700,000, that's considered top of the market, right? When maybe in California, that might be considered very cheap. But you kind of have to understand all those trends first to understand, where do you have strength to negotiate and where do you kind of have to give into market pressures, I think is a starting point.
Brian, in your experience, asking the right questions is really important. Where do you stand on this interrogation?
Asking the right questions, but also understanding the background information. So every negotiation we talked about earlier starts with preparation. So understanding all the dynamics around the situation that you're about to negotiate are also critically important. I own a bunch of real estate as well. I bought probably 10 properties down in Tampa, Florida in the last 18 months. And literally just watching the market and watching valuations fluctuate. And then one of the other critical keys to negotiation, in my point, and I say this in my books, is never get emotionally involved in a deal because there's always another one around the corner. So we'll make multiple offers on real estate, for instance, like what Rich does, knowing that if they don't take it, it's okay. I'll make the same offer to somebody else. And I'll do that 4 or 5 times until somebody says yes. So the negotiation is understanding the market, the dynamics, the people that are in it, how things are working, and then structure your offer, your negotiation around all those points without being emotionally involved. So if you understand there's always a better deal or there's always another deal down the road, then it's easy to go into the negotiation process and win.
Real estate's unique because oftentimes the buyer and seller are not communicating directly. Mm-hmm. You have brokers who are the in-betweens. How do you have to handle that differently?
I use the same broker on all of our deals, so she knows my deal. So she knows if I make an offer and they come back and counter it, she already knows what I'm going to say, right? And this is having a good relationship with the people you're working with. One of the first things I said in the podcast today is having a good team of people. My broker here in Atlanta, my broker in Florida, both know what I'm going to do and what I will and won't agree to. So I let them just work their magic. And if they come back and say, hey, the buyer said this, I'm like, well, you know what I'm going to say. And if they don't want the deal, we'll move on to the next one, right? Because it has to be a good deal or we're not going to do it.
I like the takeaway that you have to separate your emotion from the process. Everald, you mentioned that you're negotiating less frequently at a surprising amount on the auto sales. Does your experience in sales and negotiation help you in real estate? Because I know that you've had real estate purchases too.
Yeah, it certainly does. And like Brian is saying, I've actually partnered with a couple of brokers that I know, and we've developed a relationship as well. And they, even though it's not as many properties as as these gentlemen are doing, but they know what I'm looking for. They you know, it's all about time, right? We want to conserve time. We're very busy people, and they do the legwork, and they bring either if it's a good deal, or they bring their recommendations accordingly. And I trust them as well, because they've done business with me on the other side. So it's a mutual trust relationship, and I take their advice, but then I'll make the decision based on what I think is right.
Rich, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, your question earlier is an interesting one for real estate, and that is that when you're in a transaction, you know, if you're a real estate agent or the buyer or the seller, you've got to worry about not necessarily dealing with the opposite party. In other words, the buyer doesn't have to worry about negotiating with the seller, but the agents are negotiating with each other, and the buyers and sellers are usually sort of like a telephone game. So I think it's imperative on an agent, right? An agent may himself be a good negotiator, but I think the trick is there's a large variety of real estate agents and their competency and their their responsiveness and their willingness to work with you. You've got to kind of sense quickly in the opposite party that you're dealing with, that other agent, you know, what's their personality like? You've got to be able to connect to them. They've got to like you. They've got to trust you. And it can be tricky at times to know if, I don't know, the offer you're presenting is being presented correctly to the actual buyer or seller, you know, through the agent. And so sometimes you may sense that message isn't quite getting across, and you've got to find creative, tactful ways to go back to that agent and, you know, ask them in a way that they can respond to, hey, look, you know, did they really think about this aspect of the deal yet?
Yeah, it can be a tricky one. And I don't know if the panel has any input into like strategy. Like, do you ask for the moon? How big an ask are you making when starting a negotiation, because you have the brokers often talking to each other? Or are you putting forth something more realistic and reachable?
I'll jump in on that one. And the example I always use, and I love this one, y'all know who Richard Branson is, right?
Yep.
He wrote a book called Screw It, Just Do It years ago. And one of the things that he said in his book, and he was talking about his acquisition of Necker Island, and they were asking $8 million for the island. He offered them $100,000, right? It was a ridiculous offer. He got it for 180, right? So one of the things he says in his book, and I've had people, by the way, in podcasts say, well, that's just mean to do that. But one of the things he said is, if your first offer doesn't insult them, you offered too much. But what we're really doing in that lowball offer is trying to set an anchor of the bottom, right? So if you're asking 100 and I offer you 90, 90 is the anchor. We're going to settle between 90 and 100. If you're offering 100 and I offer you 70, I've anchored at 70. Now we're going to figure. I might still come in at 95, but I don't know that if I offered you 95. I only know that if I've offered you 70, and we start working our way back up to what's actually going to go through. So negotiation is a big old game between the two people, and we don't know where the other party is until we start the game. And I always start the game with a low anchor.
Yeah. If I could add on to that real quick. I think that it's always going to be situationally dependent. And I can think of two very different scenarios. Me trying to buy a distressed property for the cheapest price that I can, personally. And then me as a listing agent trying to negotiate an offer on an expensive property where there's a lot of interest from many parties. So recently, I can think of two different occasions where I was nervous about how low I was going in trying to buy this investment property for a rock bottom price. I think I offered $30,000 for a townhouse. And I'm like, geez, I'm embarrassing this guy. And he took it so fast that I realized I realized I'd made a huge mistake. And if your offer gets accepted happily, you've made a huge mistake. And I just did the same thing on a much larger home that I'm probably going to do a live-in flip on. You know, it's like 4,000 square feet, beautiful house, and I offered probably like half what it's worth. And again, the guy just jumped in so fast and took it. It's like, geez, I didn't have the guts to go lower, but I just left a lot of money on the table.
Have you guys ever heard of the winner's curse?
Yeah.
The winner's curse says if you win, you paid the most that anybody else on planet Earth would pay. Right? So, and they jumped on it.
And I think the thing that I would add to that, though, is in a scenario where it's a competitive property, right? When you ask for the moon, you get ignored and it gets, sold to somebody else, and, then you're out, and maybe it's hard to find a similar property. So there's always going to be that part to consider too. If you found this person off market and they're not dealing with anybody else, you can go pretty low. If this property's on the MLS and there's lots of interest in it, you can't go too low because they may have cash offers over asking. So you kind of have to kind of know the market. You have to know what's going on.
Yeah. So it depends. All right, let's move to the next segment.
In financial negotiations, cultural nuances significantly shape strategies and outcomes. The world's cultures fall into categories like dignity, emphasizing individual rights, face, focusing on social harmony, and honor, valuing reputation. Recognizing these help tailor negotiation tactics. Cultures also differ in their adherence to rules. Tight cultures, often shaped by historical threats, strictly follow norms, while loose cultures are more flexible. This understanding is key in predicting behaviors and adapting negotiation approaches. Trust varies in importance across cultures. In some, it's fundamental to successful negotiations. In others, strategic considerations might dominate. Navigating these challenges requires understanding the underlying cultural dynamics and a commitment to effective communication. Successful global financial negotiations demand cultural intelligence and adaptability, alongside strategic skills. Embracing cultural differences can lead to more meaningful and profitable negotiation outcomes.
So in negotiation, we hear about cultural intelligence and adaptability. Cultural differences could mean different countries, but it could just be the divide between a buyer and a seller in the same small town. Brian, you're always trying to make a connection with the potential customer. What role does cultural intelligence play in the psychology of sales and negotiation?
Gosh, this is so tough. And in any instance like this, if I have the opportunity to bring somebody else into this equation who has more experience in dealing with those cultural differences, I will do it every time. And even outside of sales, I sit on city council here in my hometown, and I will always bring somebody else in that has more knowledge and experience in those areas to help me if it's something that I'm not 100% confident in what I'm doing.
That's a great tip. Rich, I know that, when you were in the military, you were abroad.
Yeah.
Has that influenced your approach to understanding cultural differences in negotiation?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the military, right, the military taught me Japanese. I went to language school and learned Japanese and lived in Japan for 5 years. I'm also a Chinese linguist, and I negotiated, right, I guess at fairly high levels in both of those languages. And I also did that in Korea.
Wow.
During like high tensions a few years ago. So I can definitely give my perspective on this, but like one thing I think of with the Chinese that I don't know, I feel like sometimes this may be different in the US, is that if let's say that you're having a big negotiation with the Chinese over a very expensive deal. Well, if you go to dinner and you sit down at dinner and you start talking numbers, I mean, they're going to be offended, when maybe in the US that would be expected, that you might dive into numbers soon. But I think that the Chinese, and I think that maybe a lot of Asian countries are like this, you might spend the whole night, you might spend several nights drinking, getting drunk together, eating together, talking about families. And then at some point when they're comfortable with you, they're just going to be like, okay, so how are we going to do this? And then you're sort of past that and you've closed the deal. When I think in America, you might spend a lot more time, I don't know, arguing over specifics. So in each case, I think, to the point earlier, if you don't understand the culture yourself, you better have someone that does, especially if there's a lot of money at stake, because it's really important to do things in the culturally correct way for that situation.
Everald, what's your experience? Because you're dealing with many different types of people, many different clients who are coming to you to buy a new car, but you're also an entrepreneur. You have a business, which can point back to your Jamaican roots.
Yeah.
Yadi.com, you're selling Jamaican products online.
Yeah.
So cultural, where does the cultural fall into all of this?
Well, I experienced a lot more of it at the dealership. Because we're in a multicultural area in just outside of Toronto, so it's very prominent, and we are basically forced to be able to learn how to deal with the different cultures, because there's just no other choice about that. And we're familiar with some cultures when the entire family will come in, and you basically have to negotiate with everybody in the family, and everybody has to have their input, and you have to respect that. You can't, be disrespecting even the younger, child or nephew or niece in the family. So you have to listen to them all, and we're familiar with the Chinese as well, and the negotiating tactics and styles. But to be honest with you, I think lately we've seen again a bit of a shift, especially here in the Greater Toronto area, where I think a lot of our clientele are kind of tired of negotiating, and they realize how the real estate market is structured here. So when they come in looking for a car from us, we find that it's not like it was about 5 to 10 years ago, where it was hours of negotiating for $1,000, or the fact that they'd walk for $100 or $500. We find that they're more apt now to listen and to be a little bit more guided. That may change again soon, but that's what we've seen now as a shift.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think being Chinese American, it's not uncommon for 3 generations to show up.
Yes.
Because everybody has to try out, the front seat, back seat.
It's like you got to go get more chairs from 2 other offices and bring them in your office so everybody can sit.
It's funny to see the cultural differences. Yeah. All right, let's move on to segment 4.
In our digital era, technology significantly impacts negotiation strategies. Data analytics empower us to identify patterns and risks, leading to informed, strategic decisions. AI-powered tools like chatbots streamline tasks, paving the way for more strategic negotiation approaches. Virtual meetings and video conferencing are now integral to negotiation, requiring adaptability and precision in digital interactions. Artificial intelligence is redefining negotiation, offering personalized and automated solutions. This technology enhances negotiation skills and strategies. In technology contract negotiations, leveraging information is key. Creating competitive environments and using AI insights help in gaining leverage. Understanding these contracts' complexities is crucial for effective negotiation outcomes. As we navigate this technological shift, our negotiation methods must evolve. Leveraging technology in negotiations is about reimagining our approach to communication, decision-making, and strategy in a fast-paced digital world.
Yeah, this one's really interesting because I think with the spotlight being on big data and artificial intelligence, I'm wondering how that can enhance negotiation strategies. Everald, I know that you use technology. It plays an important role in your approach to sales and marketing. Can you talk about that?
Well, absolutely. Especially in recent times, we've had to make really big shifts with trying to utilize technology more and a bit of AI in our approach, simply to, I think, be a bit more guided as to make sure that we understand what's really going on, or that we have caught up, or we are, along the same lines, because things are moving so fast. So even some of the reps at the office, I noticed they'll literally have it on their phone, and they'll be Googling a question that a client might ask to see what the likely response is that they should give. This is our newer, less experienced reps. because they want to be prepared and they're scared not to have the right answer. But other than that, we don't see it a lot more in depth, other than people doing a bit of research on what's out there, what's available, and how they should approach negotiating, and where they should go to get the best deal and the best experience.
Well, I know that you're using the customer database to really empower yourself as a salesperson to look up like who has leases that are coming up.
And that's something that I basically took apart and dissected myself and created my own system within the system, because even though they had this huge database available, the dealerships and from managers all the way down to reps were not very familiar with using it. So I basically sought out the help and learned the basics, and then I fully engulfed in it. Now I teach it to others. As to how to identify opportunities, and that's what has really propelled my career over the last 10 years. And it is also, I created a course now, the Lease Performance Blueprint, as a result of my learnings for the last 10 years, and that is also why I have to negotiate less with prospects or clients, because there's a system that I roll them into from car number 1, so that by the time I'm at car number 3, 4, 5, 6, they pretty much know what to expect.
Brian, in your experience, how is technology changing the landscape of sales and negotiation?
Gosh, if you think about what's available from an information standpoint on the internet these days compared to where we were 10 or 15 years ago, your customer, if they care enough to do any research, know as much about your product and your pricing as you do, because it takes a 5-minute internet search to figure out everything there is to know about whatever it is they're going to buy. So I think you're getting a much more educated consumer coming in to purchase whatever the product is, just because there's so much information available, including boards on people who have already bought the product and what they thought of it and what they thought of the dealers or whatever. Even in the field of real estate, when I buy properties, the first thing I do is go to Zillow, not to look at their Zillow price, but to look at what they bought that property for and how long ago, right? So I know if they're selling the property, I've got one right here local, they want 1.8 million. I know they bought it last year for 900,000. Well, that affects my offer greatly. And that is information that I would not have had 5 or 6 years ago that I now have, that I can use as a tool in my negotiation. So the availability of information is making the consumer so educated today that it makes it much more difficult to get into a negotiation when they already know what the deal is. So information is amazing.
So from the salesman's perspective, if the buyer is more informed, more sophisticated, what's the onus what's the responsibility of the salesperson to make that a pleasant experience and to get the deal done?
If you're an order taker, you're in trouble, right? So this is all about what we call active listening and connective response. So making a connection with your client makes them like you, makes them trust you, makes you feel like makes them think you're a professional, you're looking out for their best interests. You make that connection, people buy from who they want. People buy from who they want, right? So you've got to come across as that professional person who they has likability and trustability. And that's the difference between you getting the deal and them going down the street and doing it from somebody else. You can't be an order taker anymore, not with the information that's out there.
Yeah, we have to be prepared to dissect some of the information that the clients are coming in with. They get a lot of information, and sometimes within the same family, 2 or 3 people have different sources of information, and some of it is conflicting. So sometimes from our perspective, it's not the exact same model that they're comparing. It's not the same deal structure. They'll see a payment and they'll say, see, it's that payment. It's $500 a month. How come yours is $700 a month? And they're not dissecting the fine print. They're not dissecting the structure. So they still need us to kind of guide them through that. And for me, it makes it pretty simple. If they come in with this ammunition and they think that they're convinced about what they see. Oftentimes, I know they don't understand clearly the full details, and it's my job to basically now say, okay, here's what this means, and here's this how this is structured. Here's how what I've put together actually is more beneficial than what you see there.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I think Brian talked about this earlier about having a lot of information before you go into a negotiation. For me, with buying investment properties, sometimes I'll do different types of advertising, like direct mailers or email blasts or stuff like that, and then I'm getting calls from people that are thinking about selling me the property, and I don't usually take those calls. I like it to go to voicemail so I can call back, and most salesmen wouldn't want to do that. But I quickly, from the phone number, I can figure out which property it is. I can look that person up. I can see how many properties they own. I can see that they have mortgages. I could maybe see bankruptcies. Like I could see liens on the house. So many things, what they bought it for, how many years ago, as Brian talked about earlier. And I call them back, and 3 or 4 minutes after they called, they answer, and I'm fully prepared. I'm fully prepared, and I know maybe that their situation is more dire, or I happen to know that they probably have no intention of selling it to me for a good price. I don't have to waste too much time on it. So from that perspective, technology is very useful to the person who has it, who knows how to use it, I should say.
I mean, preparation, I think the evolution of the technology that's at our fingertips today leaves no one any excuses not to be prepared, to deal with their clients, whether you're purchasing or leasing or selling a product or service. I think it allows us all the tools we need to be prepared, because as Brian said, we know that the clients are coming in fully armed and educated already. So
it's interesting that we live in this world where information is so abundant that the challenge is actually that there's too much information sometimes, and we need to filter like what is really useful. And then there's this dichotomy of you still need to be of service to the customer. You need that human element. Do you guys think that we can reach a point where a potential buyer is just interacting with the chatbot and the chatbot can service them adequately?
There's certainly companies out there that are trying that now, for sure.
We have
customer service is terrible, though.
We have a little bit of it now, but the chats they're answered by a rep, and then it's passed on to our sales reps if it's during regular business hours. But you find you can only get to a certain point with that. I always get to a certain point, and I'm like, okay, enough of this. Give me your email or what's your phone number, and in 5 minutes you can accomplish so much more than going back and forth for 20 minutes on the phone. So I like the fact that it generates leads. That's the main advantage for us, is that the chats will come in, or the e-leads, or we call them rapid responses. So they come from all different avenues. We welcome the leads, because wherever they're coming from, there's a live person on the other side. There's a prospect. But I teach the team to quickly make contact, establish a bit of rapport, but then quickly try to move them over to a phone or email, so that you can make a more genuine connection. I think there's so much more value in having a direct, meaningful conversation with a person.
That's the perfect segue to our final segment.
In the realm of negotiation, relationship building is the linchpin of long-term success. It's not just about reaching an agreement, but about fostering trust, empathy, and cooperation that extend beyond the negotiation table. At the heart of these relationships is trust, a belief in the reliability and integrity of the other party. It's about understanding their needs, being empathetic to their perspectives, and working cooperatively towards mutual goals. Effective relationship building and negotiation is rooted in active listening and open communication. By genuinely understanding the other party's concerns and needs, we build a foundation of mutual respect. This approach not only enhances the immediate negotiation outcome, but also lays the groundwork for future collaboration. The long game in negotiation is about seeing beyond the immediate deal. It's about cultivating relationships that foster ongoing collaboration, opening doors to new opportunities and partnerships. This approach to negotiation is not just a strategy, but a philosophy for sustained business success.
Brian, you mentioned that a salesperson cannot be an order taker. Can you give us some tips and advice? Like, how do we establish that trust and build that relationship more quickly?
Yeah. So I in my training, I teach overcoming the first objection, right? And I think this is what a lot of salespeople miss. And the first objection in any sales environment is that you're a salesperson. And people, by their very nature, do not trust salespeople. It's not you. You might be a great person. You might coach Little League on the weekends and your kids play with their kids. But when you put your sales hat on, you become someone that they don't trust what's coming from you, right? They're afraid of you. They're afraid of being sold, and they're afraid of the unknown, because nobody wants to be sold something for more than it costs or sold something they don't need. And they're afraid of that unknown, which is the experience that you're about to take them through. That's the first objection. So you as a salesperson need to overcome that. They put their walls of defense up. They're ready to battle with you. You need to figure out how to overcome it. And we do this through making an initial connection and saying, hey, by the way, if you know, I need to ask you some questions. I need to figure out if what I have is what you're looking for. If we figure out that that's right, then I will give you some options. I'll run over some pricing, and then I'm going to let you decide if that's what you want to do. Is that fair enough? You know, that's basically my opening line. And by doing that, I'm really telling the person that I'm not going to try and sell you. I'm just going to give you your options and let you decide, right? And what I need to do is ask you a bunch of questions, because I need to figure out if what I have is what you're looking for. I'm not just going to push on you whatever it is I've got. And so overcoming those first couple of objections, or the first objection, which is you're a salesperson, will begin to build that likability, will begin to build that trust. And you better do that on every sale, or you are going to be fighting that wall of mistrust for the entire sales process that you go through.
And I think before we went live, you were talking about, it's like the top 1% versus, it's like very, very good versus those who are just starting and struggling. Like, what are the differences?
I literally put that single, what we call set at ease statement, into an organization in October. And by December, we had increased the overall company's close ratio from 27 to 35%, simply by teaching their salespeople how to overcome the initial objection. And this was an in-home sales organization. And walking up to the door, overcoming the objection, set the person at ease, letting them know that we're not going to push them. And their close ratio went up 8%. That's gigantic. It's like a 25% increase in close ratio, simply by doing that one thing.
Is that learning how to frame it at the start?
I teach people, look, if you are a master closer, then you go do what you want to do. Do your thing. But if you're not, I know this works. So you do exactly what I tell you, say exactly the way I say it, and it will work for you. Your close ratio will go up. And then when you get better and when you get more comfortable, then you can start doing it a little different. You can insert your own personality. You can change things. But I know that works. So do what I tell you. Let me make you better. And then you can start to branch out and become your own person, if that makes sense.
Rich, how about your experience? I mean, you're dealing with not only buyers and sellers, you're also dealing with tenants. It's very important to establish trust, empathy, and good relationships.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like when you start with tenants. I think one thing I've seen with tenants is you want to show empathy to a certain degree. And again, it depends on what kind of tenants you're dealing with, but I deal with a lot of different types. You show empathy to a certain degree, but a lot of times, you know, tenants are kind of like, well, this guy's so willing to be helpful and willing to help me out that I think I can stretch this, right? I think I can stay a month behind. I think I can stay 2 months behind, and that's all very dangerous. So I'm like approachable and helpful, but I get, you know, I'm firm, and I'm kind of like, well, this is the rule, and this is about as far as I can go. Now, when I think about like real estate agent, convincing, having somebody decide to list a house with you, choosing you to be a buyer, to be the buyer's agent, I think it has a lot to do with not coming off salesy, and I think it has a lot to do with, like, a lot of times I'm getting leads, sending out mailers, getting people's names, talking to them. And I think a big part of it is realizing that this person doesn't need to list their property today, but they might list it in 6 months or a year or 2 years. And so you're staying in touch with them appropriately, with an appropriate level of maybe personal connections once in a while and professional connections once in a while, so that when they sort of surprise you and just suddenly decide they have to sell their house immediately, luckily, it's kind of like, oh, he contacted me last week. I think I might have saw his thing on Facebook. Somebody else said that they, sold a house with him, and they're going to think of you. And I think they have to, besides just meeting you, I think reputation has a lot to do with it as well. So I think that trust doesn't necessarily come from just the interaction with you, but maybe social proof of some kind, and maybe seeing through Facebook and other avenues that you are like a upstanding person in the community outside of being a salesman of whatever you're selling.
Yeah, getting information from a third party other than from you directly goes a long way in establishing that trust. Everald, I want to go to you because you're consistently top salesperson in your dealership.
Yeah.
You're masterful in fostering these long-term customer relationships where, like, a family comes to you for many cars. And this is in an industry that is viewed as very transactional. What's your secret?
Well, I think the secret that I learned a long time ago, and even more, I've seen it over and over play through, is that I treat my clients as a pair. I don't appear desperate or that I need any one single sale. So from the very beginning, for example, I think I shared with you before, Andy, where I met the president of Toyota Motor Corporation, or have several CEOs as clients of mine. And you'd think that if we were more of a junior sales rep or even experienced sales rep, they'd be intimidated by meeting, a CEO or a celebrity or somebody that's got a major position. And by treating that person as a peer, and it's mutual respect. Yes, you're having conversations, but having conversations other than okay, what are you looking to buy? What do you have? What are payments and all that stuff? We strike a mutual, what is a mutual interest? Is there a common ground? Where can I establish that common ground? And I find that having those types of conversations, and it's nothing long and drawn out, but I always seem to find something with common ground that makes sense. And one of the things that I think salespeople struggle with today continuously is fundamentally their ability to communicate. Because if all they know is the script, they're selling. If all they know is the script, you can go over the script so many times and you'll stumble. I don't use a script. Okay. They make fun of me at work a lot because I don't even know half the features or functions of our cars, because it's not the thing I focus on. I learn it as I go, and it always comes to me as I go, because you go over it so many times, you just retain it. But it's not what I run to. I focus on how can I make a connection, a genuine connection with this person. And it's just like, you and I, Andy, you make an effort. I made an effort to travel and to visit you, to make a connection because I thought it was meaningful. And so my clients have appreciated the fact that I've heard this numerous times. Out of maybe 5 out of 10 clients will say, well, you're not pushy. They'll send the reviews in. We didn't realize we bought a car. There's no pushing. There's no, it's none of that. It's very simple. And so that's how I approach it. I'm a peer of the clients. I treat them. I want to be treated with respect, not because I'm selling something. And our brand has a lot to do with trust. Lexus is a brand that people trust. So we're selling from a different position to begin with. We're not selling where we have to justify the reliability of our product, the customer service, of our product. We're selling from a different level, and we maintain that. We have the pride in that. We dress for the part. We speak, the language, and we demonstrate we care and we treat people as guests. So we have those philosophies that we follow. That's more what we sell, is more the philosophy than trying to shove payments down or a product.
Before moving on, I just want to mention that I've heard Brian talk about like when you go to buy a car, nobody goes to the dealership and the salesperson says, before we have a conversation, you have to read this entire manual to understand all the features. And it's funny, right? Because I think often in negotiation, we feel like we need to know, we need to be familiar with all the features, all the gadgets and everything. And Everald is proof that that's not where the negotiation is happening. It's really treating your customer or the person on the other side as a guest, respectfully advising them, helping them. Rich, any final thoughts?
I guess I think this goes to what Everald was saying, and I think of this in real estate, and that is when people buy a house, it's very emotions based. I think it's very emotions based, and I think you need to understand that. Like they're not like buying, oh cool, like this house is worth this much, like, and this is a pretty expensive floor, and that's like a really expensive pool. But it's like, wow, my God, I could really see like my kids here. Oh my God, just imagine like high school prom on this, stairwell right here, taking pictures. And so I think that goes to the issue of features, right? It's not so much that the features are important, but it's like the feelings. It's like, what is that? What do they care about? What are they thinking about? What is it that they're excited about? Making a life here, or whatever it is, or a really safe car for my kid, or whatever the situation is. I think it has a lot to do with feelings. And another thing that I just wanted to maybe end with, if this is kind of, one of the last things I'll say, is that I feel like a lot of times people focus on, I guess, it has a lot more to do with trust, like a situation, or not coming off desperate. A lot of times I'll say to clients, like, you should choose the best real estate agent you can. And you don't have to choose me. I think you should interview other people. And they almost always say, no, Rich, we want you. But I like to give them that. I give them that out. Like, a real estate agent should be able to do A, B, and C for you. And if it's not me, make sure you get that. And they go, no, Rich, we want you to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's worked very well.
So, and I'll try to throw something in there as we close as well. I mean, this is like fresh because this just happened yesterday. We had a client walk in and wanted a salesperson, and they asked me to help her. And she came in and she sat down and she goes, I don't need to drive the car. And I'm like, you sure? I just want to place an order. I want to buy this car. And in front of me, she's calling her bank to withdraw $100,000. She's literally calling her investment banker and said, I will need 100. And I go, what are you doing? And I said, you're not going to buy this car cash. Right? So, and I said to her, if you go to 9 out of 10 dealerships, they're going to take that money and run and do this transaction the easiest way possible, which is just to do a quick cash deal and say, pick up the car tomorrow. I'm going to show you why you will keep that money, or most of it, where it is, and lease this vehicle instead. And I created the structure, I did the math, and I showed her why, and I got her 2.3%, which is unheard of. And I showed her how we're going to get the 2.3%. And she kept her money in the bank, right? Making many times more than that to now make the car payments for the vehicle. So that is one of the ways I establish value. So now that client has gone home saying, I just, acquired this vehicle. And I will say to clients, I'm not suggesting leasing for the purpose of leasing. I'm suggesting leasing based on the structure to save you money. That's a typical way I explain it. I'm not trying to lease you anything, but I'm trying to say to you, there's a better way to do this. And when you take that time to establish that with clients, they go, oh my goodness, nobody showed me this before. Now, automatically that builds a huge amount of trust. And another quick example, when clients are purchasing pre-owned vehicles from us, as a Lexus dealer, as a Lexus certified, our cars are typically $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 more than, let's say, you buy it on a regular used car lot. And I'll say to that client straight up, you can buy this car for $3,000, $4,000 less elsewhere. You can buy something similar for this, but here's why you'll pay more here, because we do this, this, and this. Okay, so just like Rich is saying, deflecting that you can choose another real estate agent, I'm saying you can choose a cheaper car. You can buy one for less money. Doesn't mean it's better, but here's why you will pay more here. And inevitably, they leave with our product because they want the service, they want the maintenance, they want the history, they want the back end of a brand, and they want to deal with somebody like myself or Rich or you, Andy, that will take the time to give them the right advice instead of selling. So right there, I haven't sold anything. All I've done with those two examples is provided advice as to why. Now, if I've given the advice, after I've given the advice, you still want to buy cash, that's your choice. But I'm not doing my job to the level that which we know we can if I haven't given you that alternative.
I love that he's giving advice, but he's selling a lot of cars. So just some quick takeaways. I think we covered a lot here. We talked negotiation and sales almost interchangeably. And, my takeaways are that we need to view negotiation, I think, in a positive light, because life is in many ways a negotiation. Going out every day, things can be negotiated. And it's about asking the right questions. It's about listening. It's about providing value. It requires having a certain level of confidence in yourself and positioning yourself. You can't be timid or shy. You have to have a strong belief in yourself and the value that you're providing to get the negotiation to a win-win for both sides. And then we talked about cultural intelligence and needing to understand the intricacies. You can't approach every negotiation in the same way. Each one's a little bit different. And Rich talked about things are very situational. It's not always the same. So I want to leave the viewers and listeners, I want to leave you with a call to action. Challenge yourself to exercise your negotiation skills. Go out and try it. Whether you're at a store, ask for a discount, or simply ask, does this ever go on sale? And you might be surprised with the outcome. For the advanced, call your cable TV provider or internet company and ask if they can give you a better rate and see what happens. So take the opportunity to apply these insights from this episode and see what the positive impact is on your financial outcome. I want to thank the panelists for joining. Brian Will, who had to leave early. You can find him at brianwillmedia.com. Excellent sales trainer, entrepreneur. Rich Carey, thank you for coming back to Inspired Money. You can find him at youtube.com/richonmoney. And Everold, thereidmethod.com. You can also shop for really cool Jamaican products at yadi.com. But thank you to our panelists for sharing all their insights this evening. I hope to see you, the viewer, and the listeners next week, Wednesday, February 7th at 6 p.m. We have episode 22 where we're going to be talking about investing in sustainable and ethical companies. So it's going to be a great discussion. In the meantime, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everybody.